Hi guys, this is topic 6.2, and what we're looking at is classic design, and we're looking at function and form. So classic designs, they are harmonious, well proportioned in form, and they often retain their styles. And this is just a kind of an example of that. These are both bomber jackets. This is a current bomber jacket that you could buy online, and this is one from World War II. And what we want to see is that they're retaining more or less the same form over many years. So this is in World War II, so it's over, what, I guess 70 years ago. This is about 70 years ago, and this is today. So it's retaining the style. Now, of course, the furry collar have gone, but you can see that more or less the pockets are the same, the waistline's the same, the sleeves are the same, the overall shape of the coat is the same. So it's maintaining that style over many, many, many years. And these are an example of a classic design that has more or less stayed the same over a long time because of its form. It's harmonious and well proportioned, and so it retains that style. Now, we often say in design that form follows function. Okay, and this is a fundamental principle of classic design. Sometimes it's hard to see though. So, as we go through this, I'm going to talk about this. Some products are intuitive. They have a beautiful form because they're designed with function as well as their primary goal. When developing a new design, the lines between form and function often get blurred. And what we want you to consider is this angle pose lamp designed by this guy named George Card. Carwadin, I'm not sure, Carwadin, sorry, I don't know how to say his name, in 1947. And one of the things that I want you to pay attention to with this is that this was really about function. Really what George Carwadin wanted to do is he wanted to have a lamp that you could angle at any angle in three-dimensional space. So basically, we're talking about three axes of the XYZ axis. So you can swivel this in a circle this way. You can change the angle in any kind of way that you want, so that you can get the light as you need it. Okay, and this was a classic design. Very, very beautiful, even though it's very functional. I mean, you can see the springs and you can see all the connections, you can see the wire and all that stuff. So, one might say, well, that's not very beautiful. All that stuff should be hidden. But that adds to its appeal. It adds to its aesthetics, the fact that it has all of that stuff visible for you to see. So this is an example of where, this was designed pretty much purely for function, the angle pose lamp, but it ended up having a form that was quite beautiful. This is just kind of a funny video to watch. It's basically a stop motion video of these angle pose lamps, and I do want you to watch it because it shows you all of the different angles that these lamps could take. Okay, now when you reinterpret a classic design, the original form needs to be respected. And the underlying structure of the form understood before making changes. Decorations applied must be suitable to the form and take into account the function of the object, although classic does not necessarily mean the style needs to be minimalist in nature or lacking any decorations. Okay, so here's a couple examples of that. So this is an example of a modern day record player. So these are kinds of things that I actually see kids having. In fact, I've got some friends whose kids have these record players and they play records on them. And this is a modern example of a record player, but it's based on a classic design, something like this right here, where you would, it's a portable record player that you would take with you, because back in the day you didn't have an Alexa, you didn't have iPods, you didn't have iPads. If you wanted to listen to music, you'd carry it around a record player if that's what you wanted. So this is retro styling and it's a classic design. Notice that the basic design is very similar between the two record players, except this one is much, much older. So this is an important part to understand about reinterpreting a classic design. It needs to respect the form. So you can recognize how these two things are very similar. Okay, now let's talk about form and function. So form, and this is a definition from the IB, also considered as the three-dimensional space that a product takes up, is in the context of classic design, form relates to the shape of a product and the aesthetic qualities of that shape. And then function. Function is, when we're considering classic design, is based on how well they fulfill the tasks that they're designed for. And so here's two different products that basically fulfill the same task. These are lemon squeezers, okay? This one is, it's called the Safe Juicer, and this is just, I don't know, it's just a random one that I found. Now, they both do the same thing. You will get a some lemon juice out of both of these, but this one is much more form oriented, right? This is much more function oriented, even though their function is the same. And in fact, maybe this one, you could argue, is actually more functional because it's a one-piece thing. It's got a pour spout. This one you have to like position over a cup, and you have to, the juice will go down in here. But I can imagine that this particular juicer would not be as easy to use as this, but one of these has a much more beautiful form, which is this. And that's really, there's a conflict. There's a tension between the form of an object and the function of an object. And that's an important thing to consider. So this is a perfect example of that, where you're looking at form over here and function over here. This is really not very pretty. So it doesn't have a very nice form, but it is very functional. This has a nice form, and it is still functional, but maybe not as functional as this particular design. Okay, this is one that the IB wanted you to consider, and it has to do with the Volkswagen Beetle again. So not all classic designs are based on aesthetic appeal as the primary generator for an idea. For example, the designers of many early examples of mass-produced motor cars are now considered classics, where they were more interested in function than form. And so the VW Beetle is an example of that. So it was designed by Ferdinand Porsche, the same guy who Porsche Motor Company is named after, in the 1930s, and it was aimed at ordinary people with modest incomes. Okay, so you're talking about people with these were not for the rich, and Porsche economized on many features considered standard and necessary today, such as a rear window. The original VW Beetles didn't have a rear window. You can see it. There's just not one there. The engine's still in the back. Now, this is a classic form, though. People loved it. They absolutely loved the form of it. That was something that was aesthetically appealing to them. So the aesthetic appeal kind of came from the function rather than starting with the form. Today's Beetles, so this is a brand new 2020 Volkswagen Beetle, it retains that same styling, but it is also looking at increasing the functionality of the car. It has a rear window, it's going to have air conditioning, it's going to have power steering, it's going to have power door locks, it's going to have power windows, all that stuff. Everything here was manual. Nothing was automatic. No air conditioning, you're not going to have power steering, you're going to crank the windows up and down. This was a purely, function following form, and this is more form and function together. Same with the Mini Cooper. So the first Minis were economical, and they were priced low so that lots of people could afford them. And this is an example of an early Mini. And they were tiny, tiny cars, right? Like, they are really small. If you actually see one, they're quite a bit smaller than a Mini Cooper is today. So quite small, but this was made to be functional. It wasn't really about the form. Now, of course, people liked the form. They thought it's kind of an adorable car. It's beautiful, and that's why we have these today. These Mini Coopers are also, when you look at them, they're quite an attractive car. They look nice, and you can see how they've connected over time. But the function came first in this, and then the form was something that people appreciated from the function. Okay, and that leads us to this idea of conflict and compromise. So the development of a new product often requires multidisciplinary teams, including designers, engineers, and manufacturers, and these different actors often have different priorities when developing a product, and this can lead to conflict. In order to achieve the goals of creating a new product, the different team members must often compromise. And so this is kind of an interesting example of it, and I think it's a good way to look at form and function. So, on a continuum here, we've got function over here, and you've got form over here. So this may be more beautiful. This is much more functional. right? So this is the clock face, so digital clock face to an analog clock face where, well, you can't really tell what time it is. You can't tell the gradations. Is it 6:13 or is it 6:12? You're not going to be able to tell from this particular clock, right? Now you can see this actually with Apple watches. So when you go to the Apple Watch interface, you can pick the watch face that you're interested in, and this is, I think, much an interesting kind of connection with engineers and designers being multidisciplinary, trying to figure out how can we compromise about form and function. And so you can pick different watch faces on your Apple face that are going to show different things. I mean, you can pick all the way over here to function, where it's just digital numbers, to form, where it's over here and you've got no, there's really no numbers that you can see on that. And then mixtures of the two. You can get ones that are analog and digital on the same clock face. So this is a compromise that people have made, that engineers and designers have made, and manufacturers, on this form to function idea. So this tension exists between form and function when developing new products, and it's based on, especially when it's based on classic design. So let's talk about practical function. This is considered with the aspects of performance such as size and ease of use. So practical function is concerned with the size and ease of use. Such aspects are quantifiable and objective evaluations can take place. So, if we think of the function of a sofa should be something that you can sit on, something that is comfortable to use, that makes you want to sit on it, enough space for multiple people maybe to sit on. It's, when we're talking about practical function, you might look at this, and this is a classic design. These are called Chesterfields, and they're a classic design. And this is a kind of the classic design of a Chesterfield. Very comfortable. You sit on this thing and you're like, oh yeah, you just sink into it. It's really comfortable. And this is a more modern take on the same idea. You can see that it's got the same styling, but it's updated a bit for a more modern sensibility. And this is practical function. This thing is comfortable to sit in, and it looks nice. Now, we look at something like form over function, and this is where you get some interesting design ideas too. So, the psychological function is mostly concerned with the different emotional reactions or attachments people have with products, and we'll look at these mobile phones in a little bit, and favorite pieces of apparel. But this the psychological function is more concerned with the form. So when we look at that, you would look at something like this sofa here. Now this sofa is not, well, I mean, it might be comfortable, but it doesn't look as comfortable as the Chesterfield. You couldn't have probably more than one person really sit in this thing, so it's not as functional as that Chesterfield that I showed you in the last slide. So this is more about form and less about function. And this is an example right here of a form over function, where this thing, wow, it looks amazing. That's a really interesting and beautiful design. But would you want to sit in that thing all day? Like, would this be something that you would want to watch a movie on? So this is a form over function idea. Okay, so we need to pay attention to that. And there's a tension between form and function when you're developing new products. Now, let's talk about retro styling. So retro styling is a design that uses the form and decoration from a particular period or time or style. So this is a brand new refrigerator, brand new. So but it's based on a retro style kind of refrigerator. So if you were to look at refrigerators back in the 1950s and 1940s, they had this kind of handle. They kind of had this color to them. But you open it up and it's all modern inside. And it's energy efficient. It's very, something that would work well. Here's a cell phone stand that is based on an old TV, right? So this is what TVs back, in the day used to look like. They'd have these little dials. This is how you would change your channel, and here's a little speaker that it would have. So this is the idea of a retro styled cell phone stand. This is a toaster. Again, this has a retro style. If you look at the way that this looks, this is something that would fit in well in the 1950s. or 60s, and same with this. This is a like a just a a Bluetooth speaker, but it's retro styled, to look like a radio from maybe the 1960s. So we're looking at retro styling being something, using a design aesthetic from a particular period of time or style. Okay, and this is appealing to some people. Some people don't like it. Some people do, and this is the non-quantifiable. If we get back to psychological functions, when we're talking about people's aesthetics, they're much harder to actually measure and quantify. Whereas, practical function is easier to quantify, and an objective evaluation can take place. Is this sofa comfortable? When you sit in this, is this sofa comfortable for you? Yes or no? When we sit in this sofa, is this sofa comfortable for you? Yes or no? Well, okay, well, the answer might be no, but hey, I like the style. Or you might say, actually, I hate the style of this. I love the style of this. These are some people would find these aesthetically pleasing. Oh, I like the retro styling on it. Some people go, no, I hate that. I want more modern style, or I want something that's cleaner lines and that kind of thing. Okay, here's another kind of example of that, and this is a reboot of a retro style, and this is these are Volkswagen minibuses, and the last one I think was also produced in Brazil in the early 2000s. So they stopped making them, but today they've kind of rebooted it and tried to keep it in a similar style, so it looks similar, but this is also an electric vehicle, so it's kind of taken that retro style. If we go back to the definition of that, it uses the form and decoration from a particular time or style, right? So it's using this older form and style and updating it for something new, and this is appealing to people. Okay, one other type of retro style that you need to know is something called Art Deco, and this has its roots in exclusive handmade decorative arts in the 1920s. So in France in the 1920s, you would have exclusive, so this meant expensive. You'd have these handmade French decorative arts, and of course, if things are expensive, often it's appealing to rich people, and that often filters down into the masses in later years. So in the 1930s, you had people with mass productions and economies of scale. They're producing cheaper kind of knockoff versions of Art Deco style. And they were made of metal and plastic and glass. The decorative style was easily added to many products, lamps, furnitures, or surfaces on buildings. And it was used widely in architecture and lighting. So this is an example of an Art Deco building from Miami. Old Town Miami's got a lot of Art Deco buildings in them, and they all sort of have this similar style, very colorful, these lines going up and sort of these curves on the balconies and things like that. The lettering is very Art Deco. Here's an Art Deco lamp, and you can kind of see some of that similar lines going up and rounded bits to it. Here's some furniture that's also Art Deco. So at first it was exclusive, so handmade, decorative, expensive for the rich, and then that filtered down into the masses, and it was produced in the 1930s. But still, lots of people find it appealing today, and nice Art Deco things can actually sell very well today. Okay, the way in which humans need to interact with objects often dictates their form. This interaction can be classified into three aspects. We can talk about the assembling of an object during its manufacture or at home, using it, repairing, or maintaining it. And an example that the IB wants you to consider is the human interface of the cell phones. Okay, so user interface. And so, if you look at cell phones through the ages, well, not through the ages, but through the last few decades, you can see how they've changed. And so at first, they were basically just a telephone. It was a portable telephone, and there was not much else to it other than the handset. And that's what these, this first handset cell phones were like. Then we got something that was a little more smaller, so it was more functional. But the actual human interface wasn't that radically different. I mean, you got this sort of digital screen here, and there was a small digital screen on some of these, but you got this digital screen that allowed you to see numbers and send text messages. Then along came something called a PDA, which was a personal device assistant, I think. And then this, I'll have to look that up. Sorry, but yeah, PDA. I forget what it stands for. But these were devices that were not necessarily phones, but what they did incorporate. Later models did incorporate phones into them. But basically, with these, you had screens that you could write on and see things and save work to, and that led to the BlackBerry. And the BlackBerry was, kind of another functional step up where you had apps and things like that that you could run. Still had its little QWERTY keyboard. These, by the way, if you wanted to send a text message, you'd have to type in the ABC would be here, so you'd have to type in, if you wanted a C, you would have to type this number 3 times. I remember my students in Mexico when I was teaching in 2002, they basically could text under the table. They had memorized the keypad so well that they could text under the table and be looking me straight in the eye. Fortunately, now kids can't do that. It's difficult to text under the table with your cell phone. I can always tell when you guys are texting under the table in your cell phone because you're looking down at your cell phone, whereas these guys would be looking me in the eye and texting each other. So then we get to our the smartphones that we have today, where the function is quite a bit more advanced than any of these other ones, and they run apps, and the user interface is really, really great. This is an article, and you should click on it and just kind of have a quick look through. It's a user interface design guide, so it's going to give you some really good ideas about how on an app you should have the user interface. All right, and that's it for me, guys. Thanks for watching. Bye bye.